Hello, welcome back to Mr. Rockenstein's Flipped Classroom and today's lesson, which is on decimal addition. Couple of lesson goals today. First goal, you will be able to add decimal numbers. Pretty straightforward. And number two, you will be able to explain why you must line up the decimal points when adding decimal numbers. So we're going to take care of number one. In this lesson, we're going to work on two goals. Goal number one, you will be able to add decimal numbers. And goal number two, you will be able to explain why you must line up the decimal points when adding decimal numbers. Okay, so let's start with the first goal first and work on decimal addition. The steps for decimal addition are, number one, line up the decimal points. Number two, add. And number three, drop down the decimal point. So on the next slide, we're going to put those steps to use. So here's a problem we can use to demonstrate these steps. I've got the steps over on the side. Step one, line up the decimal points. Step two, add. And step three, drop down the decimal point. So lining up starts with me stacking these numbers up like I would for any addition problem. So 12.3 goes on top, put my addition symbol in, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put in the decimal point from that other number first so that those two decimal points get lined up right away. That's that first step, line up. And then I'm going to look at what's to the left of the decimal point in this second number, and the only thing there is a 0. So I'm going to put in a 0. Then to the right of the decimal point are these two 2's. There's a 2 in the tenths place and a 2 in the hundredths place. And I'll add those in. And now what I've done by lining up these decimal points is I've lined up all of the place values. So I've got tens adding up with tens, even though in my second number there are no tens. Ones lined up with ones, and again in this bottom number there are no ones. But then on the right of the decimal point I've got tenths lined up with tenths, and I've got hundredths lined up with hundredths. Now on the right side of the decimal point I like to add in a 0 in any place where there's something either on the bottom or on the top and nothing in the opposite. It helps you a lot in addition, but it's going to help you even more when you get to subtracting, so it's good to get into the habit. So now I'm on to the second step, which is to add. And I'm going to add just like I've always added. 0 plus 2 is 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. 2 plus 0 is 2. 1 plus nothing is 1. Now I'm on to that last step, which is drop down the decimal point. And I'm just going to drop it straight down so that I end up with my answer, 12.52. Now I need to go and think about whether my answer makes sense. Up in the problem, I've got something that's about 12 added to something that's just about 2/10 or so. And my answer is 12 and a little bit extra. So definitely makes sense. Now it's your turn to try a problem. We've got 8 6/10 plus 2 15 hundredths. Now, remember those steps are to line up the decimal point, add, and then drop the decimal point down. If you're having trouble remembering those steps, just remember LAD. Line up, add, drop down. So pause the video and you do this problem and then we'll compare answers. Alright, so take a look at how I do this problem, compare it to how you did it, and we'll see if we did it the same way. I'm going to start with putting 8.6 on top, or 8 6/10. And then I'm going to put in that decimal point for my second number. I'm going to go look to the left and there's a 2, so I'll put that in here. I'll look to the right and I've got the 15 hundredths. I'll put those in. And then I see I've got an empty space up here, so I'm going to put in a 0. addition symbol, draw my line. Now I'm ready to add 0 plus 5, 5, 6 plus 1, 7, 8 plus 2, 10. On to that last step, drop down, and I just drop my decimal point straight down, and I get an answer of, well, it's kind of a bad decimal point. There we go. Answer of 10.75. Here's another practice problem for you. Pause the video and try adding 7 and 1/10 and 4 and 3/10. All right, so let's see how you did. 7.1 or 7 and 1/10. Then I put in the decimal point. I look at the top. What's to the left? There's a 4. Put that in. What's to the right? A 3. I'll put that in. Add in my addition symbol and my line. And then I add 1 plus 3 is 4. 7 plus 4, 11. Drop down that decimal point, and I get 11.4. Up till now, we've been really focused on that first learning goal of doing decimal addition. Now we're going to switch and work on that second learning goal, which is the answer to this question: why do you have to line up the decimals? You need to be able to explain that. And to explain that, I want to go back to the very first problem we did, which was 12 and 3/10 plus 22 hundredths equals n. If you were to stack these numbers up the way you learned to do whole number addition, it would look like this: 12.3 and 0.22. And every number would be lined up perfectly with another number. And the only place there would be overlap would be over here. Now, this won't work with decimal addition. And this is why. Let me show you. If we were to add this way, 3 and 2 would add together to equal 5. But they don't really equal 5. Here's what I mean. This 3 is 3/10, or 0.3. This 2 is actually 2/100ths, or 0.02. If we were to add these up, we would get 2, 3, decimal point 0, or 32 hundredths. That is not the same as 5, so that would be incorrect. So the reason you have to line up the decimal points is because when you line up the decimal points, you line up the place values properly. Right now we have the tenths place lined up with the hundredths place, and we have the ones place lined up with the tenths place, and we have the tens place lined up with the ones place, and that won't work. So that's why you have to line up the decimal points, so that you end up adding the right place values to each other. So now let's try one more practice problem. I want you to pause the video and try this problem, knowing what you know and knowing why you have to line up the decimal points, and then compare it to my answer. Okay, so you've done the problem. Now I'm going to do it. 67 and 9/10 plus 122. Well, where's the decimal in 122? It's right here. So when I put in my decimal point, I'm going to put it in first, and then actually all of this number is going to go to the left. I've got 122, and I'm going to add in that 0. So now I've got tenths lined up with tenths, decimal points lined up, ones lined up with ones, tens with tens, and hundreds with hundreds. So I can go on to my second step, which is to add. 9. 7 plus 2 is 9. 6 plus 2 is 8. And 1 plus nothing is 1. Now my last step, drop down the decimal point, and I get 189. So now I need to go back up to my original problem and see, does that make sense? So I've got this number here, which is about 70, and this number here, which is about 120, and I added them together. 70 and 120 would equal 190, and 189.9 is almost 190. So my answer does make sense. All right, so that's the end of this lesson on decimal addition. Remember, videos are great because you can pause them, you can rewind, you can stop them. So make sure you're doing all that. If you need to, go back and watch again. Thanks, and I'll see you in class.